citizen.
Out of many
We are world citizens, same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome to another episode of the People Powered Planet podcast, where each week we have extraordinary guests who are focused not just on all the terrible problems of the world, but what are the solutions? Solutionaries who hold some of the keys to making life on Earth better. And today we have a super special guest. He's not only a filmmaker, but he's done much more than that. He's made a number of films, The Back Nine, The Highest Pass, The Milky Way, which is not about stars in the sky. It's about the stars that are the wonderful women among us who are nursing babies. Warrior One, Dance of Liberation, some terrific films. And when one of his films did not get into Sundance, like many other filmmakers just grumble, but what did he do? He went ahead and co-started another film festival right there in the same place as Sundance, Slamdance, to help some of these indies get into the film circuit. He's also then went on to launch numerous other film festivals and advise many in the Bahamas, Lone Star, Santa Barbara, Abu Dhabi, etc., Naples, Hollywood. And he also has created several sites for filmmakers and consults with filmmakers. He's got Cause Pictures and Cause Cinema, and he has several fabulous books. One is called Habits of Heroes. Now, we've all heard various heroes, but here's the Habits of Heroes, 100 movies that can change your life. And he also has an extraordinary book that we're going to be focusing on even more today, which is called Filmmaking for Change, Making Films That Transform the World. Well, that's what we're all about here at the People Powered Planet podcast with our film, The World is My Country, but also with the wonderful filmmakers we've interviewed. Some of you may have gotten to hear, for instance, Nicholas Meyer, who did the ABC TV special The Day After, and a number of the Star Trek series he directed. And The Day After literally saved the world. Ronald Reagan credits it in his memoirs as being the thing that convinced him that his generals were wrong when they were egging him on to fight and win a nuclear war that actually would be disastrous. And he went on to make major reductions in the U.S. arms and negotiate arms treaties with the then Soviet Union, all as a result of a movie. So movies can indeed change the world. So welcome, Jon. We're so glad to have you here to talk about films that transform the world.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for welcoming me onto your show.
Great. Well, let's just start out with here you get this rejection from Sundance. What caused you to take action on that?
It's a funny story. As you can imagine, I've told it over the years. I'll give you the short version, but basically I met two other filmmakers at the independent feature film market in New York, which at the time was the spot to bring your independent film. Buyers, acquisitions executives, and over 100 filmmakers descend on the Angelica in New York. And we were all talking about how we were waiting for the Sundance news, and then at the end of that event, we all got the news in various forms. And it started with a phone call from Dan Mervish saying, we're going to have a Screw Sundance party. And then Jane, who was the other co-founder, said, well, I went to school at the University of Utah. Why don't we just go up there and show our own movies? So that's where it started. And of course I said, I'm in. And the three of us kind of rallied an event in less than 2 months. And the office was in my kitchen. And Dan wrote a press release, and we went into Park City, and we started at the south in Salt Lake City. But because we weren't getting a huge turnout from people coming down the hill, we decided literally to go into Park City, and we had something like, 20 people staying in the same condo, directors and producers. And we were down the hall from Sundance at Prospector Square. So people would get turned away from Sundance screenings and we'd let them come into our room. We were running our own projectors. And it became like a little bit of a Cinderella story that none of us really expected. And like I said, the office is in my house. So after the festival, people were calling saying, hey, you guys going to go back next year? And the other two guys kind of went off to do their own thing. And I became the executive director and kept it going for 2 years. So that's the short version. And it's still going. I think they celebrated 25 years a few years ago. So it's still going strong.
Well, that's fantastic. We've been to Slamdance and, of course, attended Sundance. We were also rejected like you, but we're really impressed with Slamdance. And you went on to actually become the executive director of one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world, the AFI Film Festival. A big deal. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that was fun because with Slamdance, I wasn't earning much of a salary, as you can imagine, and it was time for me to have a real job, so to speak. And when AFI offered me the position, I met with Jean Furstenberg. At the time, she was the CEO of AFI, and it was a great opportunity for me to come into, obviously, as you just said, an established brand, a familiar face in the film community, but really get a chance to breathe new life into this event, because it frankly had been run for the same, by the same people who are getting up in their years, and they weren't necessarily up with what was happening in the now. And I was fairly young. I think I was 28, 29 at the time. And they didn't have an American independence section. They didn't have competitive sections for the films. They didn't have a board. I was able to bring in the DGA and SAG and the WGA and bring in some studio execs and agents and just really kind of, they gave me a blank canvas, if you will. And so it was a lot of fun for me. I did that for 3 years, and we supported a ton of filmmakers from, the Russo brothers to, many other Oscar winners, and especially in the foreign language category. And it was a wonderful, wonderful period for me.
Wow, that's fabulous. Well, early in your book, you quote William Goldman, who's famously said, if you want to send a message, call Western Union. But in reality, isn't every film a message film? I mean, some are the message consume. Some are crime is really fun. Some are the message, do destructive things, whatever. And some of them are positive causes. Would you say that every film has a message?
I guess every film has a message of some kind. I think that the distinction for me is, at least before we dive into the social impact category, is that, some films actually have a really strong premise that they're trying to make a point, whereas others are simply trying to tell a story and do it with colorful characters. And so, having a mission, having a movement, making a statement, there's varying degrees, right? But since we were dancing around a campfire thousands of years ago, storytelling is storytelling, and you're trying to share something, whether it's a message or a movement or a point of view.
Right. Well, now, of course, in your book, reading your book was like taking a joyride through all the wonderful movies that I've seen over the years, and some of the amazing experiences. But among the movies you've mentioned as kind of big in starting the cause pictures thing, of course, Inconvenient Truth. You've mentioned Precious. What are some of of course, Morgan Spurlock's work and Michael Moore? Tell us a little more about what do you see as some of the main cause-driven movies, and how you think those have reshaped cinema.
Well, I think, as you mentioned, I think An Inconvenient Truth was really the spark, if you will, that really kind of triggered everything for me. And as you mentioned, I'd been working with so many festivals over the years that I was watching literally hundreds of movies a year, if not thousands. And I started to gravitate more towards this social impact space, films that had something to say. And as you said, maybe every film has a message or a premise or a point of view, but I started gravitating towards this social impact space. And I feel like, time is precious. If I'm going to spend the time, sure, we want to escape, and Star Wars is awesome. But, if I'm going to spend time in front of a screen, I'd rather get something out of it. And I think, one of the other big triggers for me in a positive way, which helped to kind of lead me to this Filmmaking for Change book, was The Cove. And The Cove, also released by Participant Media, was amazing to me, not just because it was a great movie, but the way they managed to take a really important issue of this dolphin slaughter and create a documentary, but with a structure that was much more of a what I would call a narrative structure, and essentially create a thriller. They created a thriller with a documentary. And that was kind of mind-blowing to me. And so I started doing a deeper dive into kind of analyzing documentaries and seeing which of these are really making a difference. And in fact, some weren't documentaries, some were narratives. You can go back to How Green Was My Valley, to Schindler's List and Norma Rae. I mean, there's plenty of social impact narratives, but for documentaries to manage to kind of overcome the stigma of, preachy talking heads, educational movies, documentaries have gone through a period of huge, I would even say explosive growth. They're the hottest category in most festivals now. Netflix certainly helped to pave the way and expand the audience for documentary. People are watching documentaries that never used to watch documentaries. So it's been a really exciting ride, and Filmmaking for Change just happened to come right on the cusp of all that growth. And I had the fortune of being on a panel with Michael Wiese, who, the MWP on the spine of all those movie books. And I said, hey, why don't you have a book on social impact movies? And so that's what kind of prompted me to pitch the idea and ultimately do the book.
Well, I love the book because it really does cover the whole field in such a beautiful way. I mean, I would recommend it to every prospective filmmaker and every person who's interested in causes and wants to know how to have a better impact in making their films. And for me, I came into the whole filmmaking not out of going to film school or anything, but out of being a cause person. I was working first with the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization, before they had home video, we were making documentaries on slide tape reels where people could play the sound and watch the slide. And we did a film, The Automated Air War, about the incredible technology and money that was going into making weapons against the jungle people in Vietnam, and how anyway it had 1,500 prints we sold. People showed it on trains and guerrilla showings on side of movies. People would say, my slides are worn out, send me another set, please. And it had a big impact. So from an early from the beginning, we felt that film and media were the way to communicate a message. Mm-hmm. And I was so thrilled to discover what you've talked about so much, the hero's journey story structure. And that is, you recommend a fabulous book that affected your background, your films and mine, and was called The Hero's Journey. When we started out making this film, The World Is My Country, about an amazing guy, world citizen #1, Gary Davis, a man who was for 65 years a citizen of no nation, only the entire world. When we first started that out, we started by doing it the traditional way people do, with interviewing the guests and talking to it. And we would interview Gary and he would go off on tangents, and we really just couldn't get anything useful out of our interviews with him. And then I woke up one morning, I said, wait a minute, Gary's an actor. Let's put him on stage. So I broached the idea with him. He loved the idea. He said, I've always wanted to get back on stage. My dream is to go back to Broadway. And of course, to make a stage production about his own life, was fabulous. So we closeted away there at Melanie's house, basically, working on the script, almost day and night. And the hardest part of it was throwing out everything that didn't fit the hero's journey story arc. It was, you watch the film and you see Gary's just talking about his life, but you might not even realize he had a teleprompter there and he's following a script we wrote. And the script, he has some incredible, amazing stories that have to go somewhere else in a short or something, because everything had to fit that hero's journey story arc. So I think it would be helpful for filmmakers, maybe if we went a little more into that story arc and a little bit more about the meaning of it, because the great thing, I'll tell you what I think is so important about understanding that story structure. It's not only for making films, it's for our lives. Our lives can follow that model and it can help us empower our lives. So tell us a little bit more about the hero's journey story structure.
Sure. Would you like me to share my screen with the graphic?
Sure. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you referred to it earlier. There's a couple of books that were very instrumental in my growth in terms of this social impact space. One of them was Myth in the Movies by Stuart Votilla, where he really talks about the hero's journey. And what he does is he breaks down a number of different films that are, what you would think are just traditional Hollywood movies. And he literally breaks them down into this structure. And I've always been a structure guy. I know some people are great at just coming up with an idea and taking their pen to the page and writing, but I'm better if I can plot out the structure. And what I learned with starting with Sid Field many years before, and then throwing this filter on top of the 3-act structure just helps you structure even more, right? Because you've got 12 stages. And I think if you look at most of the successful movies in the history of Hollywood, you see that a lot of them, frankly, go through this journey. And what's kind of interesting about it is you notice the top, you start with the ordinary world. So in traditional, story development, that's, kind of establishing the foundation and who are the characters. And then there's the call, right? In the first 10 minutes, typically there's a call. What is it going to be? What is your goal? And that's something that most writing coaches preach, right? You got to tell people fairly quickly what this is about and what is our hero's quest. And then what's interesting about this, if you notice, is that the arrow goes counterclockwise, which I found kind of interesting. So you get the call to adventure, and then the refusal to call, like, can I really do this? Is this even possible? And then of course there's the mentor character. So again, you look at all these movies, whether it's, it's Yoda, all these movies have a mentor that kind of helps the wisdom that helps be the guide. You think of movies. Go ahead.
Let me jump in as we're doing this, because I think many of the people on our podcast have seen our film, The World Is My Country, and it may be helpful as we go through the steps to actually see where it was in The World Is My Country. So of course, Gary starts out, his ordinary world is one that's pretty extraordinary. He's in a showbiz family, and his mother's this great pianist, and his dad is conducting the orchestra for the Republican National Convention. And when he's in his ordinary world of showbiz, he goes off to fight in World War II, gung ho to knock out Hitler's war factories. And then something happens. His own brother is killed.
Yeah.
And he suddenly realizes, hey, these people I'm killing, their families just like me. They're feeling that same pain that I'm feeling. At first, his refusal was he said, well, I'm an actor. What can I do? I can't do anything.
I'm just one guy.
Yeah, I'm just one guy. But then he meets a mentor. And his first mentor is Amory Reeves, incredible book. And he says, it struck me like lightning. He said, suddenly I realized that humanity has already invented a way to eliminate war. Inside countries with one government, we don't fight wars. What about civil wars? Two governments, two loyalties. But if everyone is in one, if the world is our country, as he said in his book, My Country is the World, then no wars. So once he had that mentorship, he went on this quest. He went on a quest of how to beat the most irrational enemy of all, war itself. Now, what hero takes on conquering war itself? I mean, what could be a bigger call to adventure than how are we going to beat war? And of course, he goes through the tests and allies, and he ends up, having these extraordinary adventures in Paris, where he's with Eleanor Roosevelt, all the famous French intellectuals, Camus, Sartre, and so on, coming to his cause. But then after he has this big success, here he is, 20,000 people at the Velodrome, people chanting his name, and they want him to be the leader. He says, no way, that's not what it's all about. It's about you being the leader. You've all got to do it. And he ends up going through his own dark night of the soul, and, ends up leaving show business and working in a metal shop. But then the metal shop director turns out to be another mentor. He turns out to be, I was
going to say, get another mentor there.
He turns out to be a guru who teaches him some deep meditation techniques and some inner journey work that finally empowers him to take on what he first refused as a call, which was when Eleanor Roosevelt, amazingly, said 4 days after his interruption of the UN and his rallying 20,000 people to the Velodrome, she said, quote, how much better would it be if Gary would start then and there a worldwide international government? Here she was saying the UN isn't set up to do that. It's a place to let off steam. Go ahead and do it. And of course, first he just thought, she's just ridiculing me. That's impossible. But after going through this journey, he ended up taking that back and going on the road back, and going through the resurrection, and finally at the end, creating the World Service Authority, putting out passports, and then returning with the elixir, because there he is at the end of the film, back on a showbiz stage. And if you saw the long version of the film, in the end, his own father, who was so outraged when he was at the Republican convention that his son would give up national citizenship, he actually also became a world citizen and had his world citizen certificate on the wall. So we took Gary through all these stages, and I think that's what made the film have 95% approval rating we've gotten from audiences and the rave reviews, because it takes them on a story rather than just preaching to them.
Yep, you nailed it.
So what advice would you have for other filmmakers who are working on developing their film, as far as how do you take a documentary, which, frequently, as you said, is talking heads, and make it a hero's journey story?
Well, I think, again, it comes back to structure. And I think first and foremost, you have to know what your goal is for making the film. That seems obvious, but frankly, sometimes it surprises filmmakers when I ask them. Some people read an article, they decide they want to tell the story. Some people read a book, they want to option the rights and adapt it or get life rights. But is it something that is entertainment or more education through entertainment, or is it to start a movement, or is there a specific call to action? A lot of these movies are made as a wake-up call, whether it's like you reference in your film, is it Leo and climate change? We're working on a project now about, the education system in America and how messed up it is and how teachers don't get the respect they should have. It's called I Quit. You can visit whotaughtyou.org and learn about that. I mean, there's a mission behind some of these movies. And if you have a mission, then it only helps you to be using a structure like the hero's journey, I believe, to make it as entertaining as you can as you're sharing this social relevancy, if you will, right? But not all these films have a toolkit. Not all these films have a very specific call to action. Schindler's List didn't have a call to action. Some of these movies have petitions they want you to sign. Some of them, are movies that are specific to create new law. So I do think it's important for a filmmaker when they start this journey of creating a documentary to think of what is the goal for that movie. And as you can see from the hundreds of impact campaigns that have been developed over the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of these impact campaigns are driven by what I'll call a distribution campaign. It doesn't do any good to have a really strong film with a mission if nobody sees it, right? But more people will see it if there's entertainment value. So I think you have to think of structure. How can I structure a movie with a beginning, middle, and end that will keep the audience interested and want to see it, and hopefully tell other people to see it? Because the more people that see it, whether there's a call to action or not, the more impact you're going to have.
And of course, that's been kind of our biggest challenge. We do have a movie, as we can tell from the feedback we've gotten, which has been extraordinary, that does entertain people and it does lift their sights. But the big challenge has been how to get more eyes on the screen for it. We recently had a collaboration with Rotary, where we had a mega meeting with well over 1,000 people signed up. We thought that by collaborating with a big organization like Rotary, we might be able, because you talk about partnerships in your book as being a key way, we might be able to draw more people to our film, as well as assisting Rotary with helping shape we had the president of Rotary International on our mega meeting. And he gave an extraordinary speech, very aligned with the vision that Gary's talking about, and also, of course, adding a very important element of love and how love can touch and change the world. Talk to us a little bit more about partnerships as a way of getting a cause film like ours and others distributed more widely.
Yeah, well, I think you hit it right on the head. I think if you have partners that can help get the word out, studios spend an average of, I don't know what it is now, $30-50 million to promote a movie. They're essentially buying your eyeballs, like paying for ads to get you to become aware of it. And I think with documentary, you have an opportunity in most cases to go to groups and affiliates and partners that can help get the word out. And if they're partners that have like, think of the Sierra Club, right? Millions of members. So if you create a documentary around climate change and you can get the Sierra Club behind it, they'll get the word out, and they want to get the word out about something that is helping to spread their message. So I think, and again, we're working on different educational partnerships with this documentary I'm working on now, this docuseries. And I think, in fact, you certainly need to find ways to generate funding sources, right? You need to have sponsorships, you need to have grants, you need to have investors to get the movie made. But in terms of marketing, I think having partnerships can be a lot more helpful than just buying ads across different platforms. And thanks to the internet, you can get really creative now with social media and get the word out without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So between partnerships and social media, I think you can really create an awareness for your project. And if you're creating awareness, then you're hopefully moving the needle.
I think that's really a very key thing. And you talk a lot about finding your audience, and you mentioned cultural creatives. And I remember that we with John Ratz when he put on his big festival where he brought all the kind of cause-oriented.
Yep, I was there.
Spiritual creative. You were there. Well, we were there too, and that was extraordinary. And of course, so tell us a little bit more about that and about the cultural creatives.
Well, I think it's been a while since John's had that GATE, organization.
Yeah. It's called GATE. What did GATE stand for again? Global
Alliance of Transformational
Entertainment.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, I was at a couple of those early board meetings. It was a great mission, but everybody's got lives and bills to pay, and ultimately, I don't know where it is right now. But I think the idea is, everybody's on this earth, and everybody's got to find their purpose and find a way to contribute to making things better, whether it's one skill set or another skill set. And I think with cultural creatives, sometimes what we see is people using their creativity to find ways of tapping into this transformational opportunity, right? Whether it's telling stories, whether it's shooting stories with your camera, whether it's painting stories, but the idea of bringing these creative minds together to leverage their strengths creatively to get messages out there into the world in a way that they want to be received, rather than, just writing and beating people over the head with, with books and text. I think, that was part of the messaging behind the cultural creatives.
Absolutely. Well, one of the challenges with our film is that many of the cultural creatives are, of course, looking for personal journeys, how they can transform their own lives and so on. And of course, Gary went through such a transformation with the guru, and it gave him that empowerment. But in some ways, his mission is so big. Basically, he's calling on we the people to create a people-powered planet, to rise above these nations that divide us, and save our world from annihilation, from nuclear, from the environment, from AI out of control, from lab-created pandemics out of control, and to instead really rise above that and create an interactive people-powered planet, which is such a big call to action that many people, I guess, feel kind of overwhelmed. Where do I get started with that? How do we take a big call to action and put it in manageable terms that people can get a grip on?
Yeah, I think that is the single biggest challenge, quite honestly, because a lot of people feel like that is so big. How am I as one person going to make a difference? And I think what we're seeing with the messaging, and I think Leo does it well in his movies. He's made a few climate change movies now. It's convincing people that every step you take is a step towards improving, whatever that category is, whether it's climate change or education or injustice. And you can't not take steps forward because you don't think you're going to make a difference. And, part of the challenge with making these films, I did a 65-page slideshow about this. It's really complicated, but you have to balance the idea of preaching to the choir, right? And telling people that will respond because they connect with you and they understand your mission and they're in that space already, versus converting people that aren't necessarily in that space. And then, of course, how do you measure it? Food Inc. was a great example of that, right? Where they made this movie that was essentially about the idea of food and being a vegetarian. And they brought all these experts in to talk about how good it is for your health and how good it is for the planet. And what they found in the research and the surveys that they had done is that it did in fact change diets, and that a really high percentage of people that saw the film changed their diets. And they admitted that they learned things they didn't know before, and Forks Over Knives ended up doing it years later. And so these movies have proven that they can convert people, right? So you take some of the crowd that is already converted, the choir, as it were, and you bring them in front of people that don't know any better yet, and you bring them some entertainment with some, the spoonful of sugar, right? And they ultimately take the medicine and enjoy it, and then they realize, oh my God, I'm different now. I just learned something, and it's changed my life.
Well, that's terrific. Well, you have also a very important chapter on distribution and how do you start getting your film before the eyes, and of course you run through many of the traditional means, but you also go into hybrid distribution. Tell us a little bit more about hybrid distribution.
Well, hybrid is kind of a loose term these days, but in the way I describe it is, rather than just handing your movie over to a distributor who's going to sell off all rights around the world, whether it's domestic and international, and maybe there's some theatrical and then all the downstream rights that come along with it. we're seeing filmmakers get more creative in one instance of essentially carving up their rights. So they might give certain territories to one company to handle, theatrical, and they might give it to another for international, and then others to handle non-theatrical, whether it's airplane, hotels, schools, the educational outreach. So they're carving it up so that one company doesn't take control and then sit on it, because frankly, most of these companies aren't good at everything. Some are great at booking films into theaters and they understand that space, but they're not so good at education or connecting to schools. But they used to just take all rights. So now we're seeing them being carved up. But I think even more important than what you say hybrid is what I would call alternative distribution models, which is I think very exciting right now, because there's a lot of amazing films that may find traditional distribution as part of the formula. Maybe they'll play theaters, but a lot of them are actually creating really unique event screening opportunities, right? Where they might play 1,000 theaters across the country on the same day. So you're marketing everybody to come and see that movie at the same time. And if you don't want to see it in a theater, there's a whole virtual element. The Wisdom of Trauma, we did a case study on that. Peter Broderick really supported this project, and I just took a lot of the information, frankly, that it's come out around his work with the film. But it's an amazing example where this Wisdom of Trauma idea of this documentary, they had event screenings that were virtual, and you could donate or you could watch it for free, but they built up their list and created a whole movement around this idea of trauma. And he's created a whole merchandise franchise almost around this movie. And Forks Over Knives did it. Fantastic Fungi's doing it now. These guys are all finding creative ways of tapping into new audiences and earning a living while doing it, but sharing really important messages to people that wouldn't otherwise know about it. Not traditional distribution, not booking it into theaters across the country.
Well, there's so many things more we could talk about on that, and I want to leave some time for our audience questions, but I do want to focus on two more things first. First, tell us just briefly about Habits of Heroes, your other book, and 100 movies that will change your life. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so with this idea, it was really me just saying, you know what, I realized that there were so many movies that had been made over the years, and almost to your point earlier about the idea that almost every movie has a message of some kind, whether they're beating you over the head with it. And I realized that if I did enough digging, I could probably come up with 100 titles that had some social relevance of some kind. And it could be something as obvious as Schindler's List, to something like Life is Beautiful, to An Inconvenient Truth. So some of them are really obvious, but what I did with that was try and bring light to these movies that maybe people didn't necessarily think about in terms of their social impact or what message might be there. And so maybe some people hadn't heard about it yet, or somebody had seen a movie 20 years ago but didn't realize kind of the underlying message of the movie. So I thought Habits of Heroes was a way to kind of bring awareness to these films. And I talk about a little fun fact that some people didn't know. And I talk about, like, the goal for the film and the message. So it's not as comprehensive or, the filmmaking for change as a methodology, but it's kind of a recommendation engine, if you will, for 100 titles.
That's terrific. Well, then tell us a little more about how can Cause Pictures and Cause Cinema help the distribution of films like ours, help get more eyes on the screen?
Well, I think it starts again with the goals of the filmmaker and what they're trying to achieve, and what type of distribution model makes sense for their particular project. Again, some of these movies are going to play, Forks Over Knives played, 80 markets before it went to Netflix. Some of these movies are going to play theaters. A lot of them are going to go straight to streaming. But I would say that, there's, depending on who you ask, there's over 500 streaming channels now. And you don't have to be on Netflix, Hulu, or HBO to find an audience. A lot of people don't know about Tubi and Zumo. These are these are huge companies that were acquired by the conglomerates and the majors that have, you know, millions of eyeballs across the country. But the average Joe here in LA, where I'm based, doesn't necessarily know about Zumo. So I think that there are sales agents that take films. A lot of these movies coming through the film festival circuit, they'll help these movies find a home. And in some cases, these movies will be distributed and sub-distributed to a lot of different non-exclusive platforms, whether it's iTunes or Amazon or Google Play and a bunch of others, Hoopla, Canopy. There's so many different platforms now, but there's also aggregation opportunities where companies you pay them a fee and they'll get the movie up on these platforms for you. So I think there's more distribution opportunities than ever before for these films. I think the trick is coming up with a creative marketing strategy and finding, as you said before, the partnerships that help you get the word out. Because it doesn't do you any good if you get your movie on iTunes. That's great. You can tell mom and dad you're on iTunes. If you can't get the word out to the masses and the people to come and see it, then what good is it going to do?
Right. Yeah. Excellently put. Well, and you mentioned the sales agents, and in your book you talk about bottom feeder sales agents, and we did have a bottom feeder who wanted to distribute our film, and we had to say no thanks to that. But we did some testing on our own. Like in South Africa, we partnered with some local activists there, and we had a broadcast on television in South Africa and had, you know, excellent responses. But what we realized is that we couldn't begin to start bicycling that out around the world. We realized how much time it took us to get one broadcast, and working with local people, we realized we do need a sales agent. How would you suggest that a film like ours get a good sales agent? Because I think ours we found that it has even more international appeal. I mean, people were even more excited about it in other countries where they are much more aware of the problem of borders and how it blocks their lives and how it squeezes their lives, and that of the need for a world that can move beyond borders. How would you say we could get sales agents to begin to get a global distribution of a film like ours?
Well, there are a number of platforms now that are essentially places for buying and selling of movies. So if you don't have a budget to, you know, take it into Berlin or Cannes or one of these major international marketplaces, you can do it online. But I would say a good place to start is with the American Film Market Association, the AFMA. They've got a website that's got lists of all the exhibitors across the country, and many of those sales agents actually can place movies in a number of different categories, whether it's selling to theatrical players like, you know, Sony Pictures Classics or Focus, or international sub-distributors that are taking movies into streaming platforms and even theaters in international regions. But I think that's a good place to start. And there's a number of great sales agents that work in the independent film space that can help get these movies out to these different companies. There's a company called Giant Pictures, for example, that is doing great things with distributors, Blood, Sweat, Honey, Circus Road. There's a bunch of sales agents that's their job, really, just to go to these buyers, domestic and international, and try and find a home for these films. It's really hard for an independent filmmaker to go right to a streaming platform, right? They want to work with these companies that can bring them packages in volume. And,
right.
and you just got to be careful with the fine print in those contracts when they try and tie you up for 15 years and don't tell you how much they're going to spend on marketing. And then they send you these reports that look like, talk about creative accounting. You don't know how you ever see a dime.
Absolutely. And we learn that over and over again in a wonderful course we've actually been doing. Have you spoken to Show and Tell or been on that at all?
I have not been part of that.
Maybe I'll introduce you to them. I think they would love to have you as a speaker on Show and Tell as well. It's a group of filmmakers all over the world learning some incredible opportunities in hybrid and all that. So
yeah, that'd be
of course,
wonderful.
Peter Broderick and all those people are also involved with it. So
that's great. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Peter's. Known him for a long time.
I want to leave a little time now for questions. Melanie, take it. Just thank you. You've been an extraordinary guest. We just love having you. And I'm going to turn it over to Melanie now for the Q&A period. Our producer, Melanie Bennett.
Thank you, Arthur and
you, Arthur.
John. Oh my gosh, your knowledge is incredible. And this is such important information. And we appreciate so much your time here. I know you have to leave right at the hour, so we'll just slip in a couple of questions. I just wanted to add really quickly this new thing about, for example, Martin Sheen and his son have brought up the movie The Way again, just like, oh, it's a new movie. And and we're being taught also with show and tell, don't put the date of your film. These films can
Make it evergreen.
Make it evergreen. And so that was exciting to me to see that. Oh yeah, this great movie, The Way. And I'm like, wait. So I love that. I just wanted to see if anything comes up to you, and if nothing does, I'll cut this out. But as Arthur said, we know the choir, for our film, which is peace and environment and saving the planet and things like that. So we have ideas of places and companies we can go to partner with. But do you have any ideas of a target audience that we can convert? People that would actually see this movie, because it's really something you have to absorb. It's a movie that you maybe have to see a few times to really understand, maybe if you're not familiar with world citizenship and world citizen government and things like that. Do you have in your mind any idea that just comes to you of a target audience that we can convert we might not have thought of? If you don't, it's fine.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, it's almost less about the audience. It's more about, how do you find partners that are kind of what I would call almost a portal that can help you get the word out to more partners that can then get the word out to more audiences? And so I'll give you two names that I think would be helpful. One is SIE Society, Social Impact Entertainment Society, terrific group of people doing amazing things. And it's free to join. And they've got tons of categories and resources where you can research all the partnership opportunities, investor opportunities, and just people that can help get the word out, and companies that can help get the word out. And that is the space, right? You have a social impact film, and that's what they're all about. The other is the Impact Hub, and Julie Davitz, and she's done amazing things and creating really cool modular activations, if you will, where if somebody sees a movie, instead of having to go and research and figure out where to go and what to do and how to learn where to take action, their website and their buttons and their links takes you to wherever you need to go, whether it's sign this or attend this or invest in this. And she's created this Impact Hub that's wonderful. And you can see it on a lot of films now. So when you finish watching a movie, especially if you're streaming it, you're given this prompt and this button to visit this Impact Hub where you can learn everything on one page. And it, again, is like a portal taking you out where you need to go to learn more and take action. Those are two companies I think could be really helpful.
Wow.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you. Great information. We'll definitely do that. We have time for just two questions. We are going to a filmmaker already. Isla has made a film about a civil rights activist and has a question. Isla, go ahead with your question.
I had created a documentary on Reverend Robert Seymour, who was the pastor for Dean Smith, who gave him the church assignment to recruit the first African-American basketball player, Charlie Scott, as well as many other, he had a lot of influence in Chapel Hill for many years, decades actually. So I made a movie about him, and I can't share it, or I can't charge to view it because of some news clips that, have copyright issues. And I just want to know what your recommendation would be. It's a compelling film. I've heard many people just absolutely love it. I want to share it, but I also want to be able to gain something from it. Not profit, but I do feel like I need some reward for the work that I've done.
There are platforms that you can go to where, and there's tools that you can use if you wanted to have Vimeo hosted on your own site where they can make a donation. I think Wisdom of Trauma is a good example where you can watch the movie and make a donation. So it's not paying for it necessarily. It goes into a different tax bracket. There's also a company called filmocracy.com. You could check them out. They are an SVOD platform, subscription video on demand, have a great audience, and the revenue stream's a little more creative than like a TVOD play, right? Where you're paying $3 or $4.99, and that sounds like something that's not an option for you. So I think finding an SVOD platform where money isn't really the thing, or hosting it via Vimeo on your own website with a donation option would probably let you stay out of trouble.
We have Michael, who's a budding filmmaker. Michael, go ahead with your question.
Hi, John. Thank you so much. This is really exciting for me. I've been working with Arthur and David Gallup and looking at taking the World Citizen Passport. I don't know if you've seen actual one yet.
Oh, that's cool.
And convert, it's been around 70 years.
Wow.
And so it's really powerful as an identity document. And what David Gallup does in DC is he sends these identity documents, and there's several other types too, to refugees around the world who have no identity at all. And there's actually 1 billion people in the world with no identity documents. So it's a huge addressable market that needs a lot of help. So what we want to do is take that, our project is World Citizen.1, is take this physical passport and create a digital identity on a form of advanced blockchain. So the identities can be sent out much, much faster and scale it much quicker without having to deal with the physical document, which also can be lost. So the idea of a permanent identity online is very powerful.
Yeah.
And then as long as you have access to the internet, you could have an identity to prove who you are. And Estonia is one country that's kind of gone on that path and digitized citizens' identities. So my question is, I kind of had the idea of doing a documentary of charting our startup company journey, like, we're interviewing investors, or we're meeting with investors, or the user experience designers, or how we're going to design, because the ultimate goal is to create an alternative to Facebook. David works closely with an organization in DC called Citizens for Global Solutions, a hub for civil society where you would have all the functionality of a social network, but it's only about solutions and what can you bring, what can you learn, and what can you share with your talents, and how can you bring solutions to the world. So that's the ultimate goal. So the idea to do a documentary charting this, what would be a good point of view? Would it be like, I'm a startup founder and this is our goal and this is what we want to do, and kind of build out a story from there? Or maybe you just tell the story, just outline.
I
the
think
whole
that the trick with these kinds of projects is to decide, first of all, what your goal is for the project. If it's to get word out and get people to sign up and be able to access this new technology that you're talking about, this new platform, the digital passport, I guess.
Yes.
Is it something that, is it going to take you a year? Is it going to take you 2? Or is it going to take you 10, right? It took Hoop Dreams 10 years. So you have to think about what's the roadmap based on the time frame that I'm looking at. And then is it something you're going to document? You want people to follow you along on that journey for like a docu-series? Is it episodic, or is it a feature?
Right.
And set up a timeline and then reverse engineer it from there. I'm sure these guys can give you my email address. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say it out loud here on this podcast, but they can put you in touch with me. I'd be happy to hear a little bit more and could give you some advice on next steps. But I know we only have a few minutes, so might be best you have my permission to give him my email, reach out to me, and I can help you break some of that down.
Thank you. I love what you said about structure, because for me, it's like, I got to have structure to work. And otherwise I'll go down a million rabbit holes and never get anywhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can find me through causepictures.com.
Thank you. All right. Will do.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Michael. So now our time is short. We're going to go back to Arthur for the close. Let me just say, Jon, we so appreciate you. We so appreciate you being here, your knowledge, spending time with us. And we know you're very busy. You're in the middle of a festival right now. So thank you again. And back to Arthur. Arthur, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for an extraordinary opportunity to chat with you. We do want everyone to come back next week for our club social, where we can talk more about the things that Jon's been telling us about, and talk more about our individual films, and discuss what we've learned from this and share. So everyone's welcome to come back same time next week and every week. And following that, we have Marja Groff, who is actually an expert on how we can create a better way to run our world. She was recognized as that by being one of the winners of the Global Challenge Foundation, a Swedish foundation that put out a multi-million-dollar award for the better ideas on how we could run this world, so we don't become extinct. And as one of the winners, she's going to be telling us, an international lawyer and an author, who's going to be helping us talk about how do we build the kind of thing we're talking about here, a people-powered planet that rises up above the nations that divide us and brings us together as a planet. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Do you want, Jon, one last word to tell us about your websites and places people can go to follow up with you?
Sure. Well, I'd just say, first and foremost, thanks for all the great work you guys are doing to, share these important ideas on social impact filmmaking. Obviously, I believe, as it sounds like you do as well, that film and media is probably the most valuable tool we have in terms of mass communication. So let's use it. So thank you for that. And then in terms of people just kind of keeping up with what I'm up to, causepictures.com is probably the best place to start. And from there, it can take you to Cause Cinema and all the other podcasts that I do, Cause Changes for the impact campaigns, the links to Substack, you can sign up for free. So there's a lot of options there, but I think causepictures.com is probably the best place to start.
All right, everybody go to causepictures.com. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us. And we will see you again next week and every week on the People Powered Planet podcast.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video.